Hello and welcome! I have been on an inadvertent search for the best LEGO Star Wars game on the DS ever since I reviewed LEGO Star Wars 2 and the Complete Saga for it. Both games are good in their own right, but LEGO Star Wars 2 isn't it due to its numerous glitches, nor do I feel it's the Complete Saga since it had to cut too many corners just to get the game to work in the first place. But there is one LEGO Star Wars game on the DS which I haven't played yet. One game which went under my radar for all these years. And this game is LEGO Star Wars 3, The Clone Wars. So is this LEGO Star Wars game the best? Well, let's plug her in and find out. Today's video is sponsored by us at 16-Bit Games. 16-Bit Games has a variety of mobile games available on Android and iOS. They're fun, fast action games designed with mobile devices in mind, which means they all look, play, and control well, no matter what device you have. Play them today for free from the links in the description below. Now, LEGO Star Wars 3 starts off in the same boat as LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga. It's made by the same developer, TT Fusion, whose studio finally has a logo. And they were both supposed to be a direct port of Traveler's Tales' newest console titles. But this time, instead of making it just for the Nintendo DS, TT Fusion was also told to port LEGO Star Wars 3 to not just the competing Sony PlayStation Portable, but the brand new Nintendo 3DS. And for one developer, this would appear to be a massive undertaking, but fortunately, this time was on TT Fusion's side. While there was only 1 year between the releases of LEGO Star Wars 2 and the Complete Saga, LEGO Star Wars 3 was supposedly in development for around 3 years. And even on the Nintendo DS, you can feel the benefits that the additional time gave the game. They were able to reuse the same engine from the Complete Saga, but this time with that extra time in development, the levels feel way more fleshed out than they ever have, way more detailed, and are a joy to play through. And Traveler's Tale even managed to bring that experience to the other platforms. And so, no matter what platform you're on, the game is fantastic to play. So if you've ever played another LEGO Star Wars game before, you'll feel right at home. But the biggest improvement which I found here was they were also able to bring in the gameplay improvements from the console game too. Like the variety of enemy difficulties and the more engaging combat situations. Which sadly comes at a cost, the loss of the second player, even on platforms which could have supported them. And LEGO Star Wars 3 also didn't bother bringing in the ground assault mode from the console games, but they were able to improve the space battles from the Complete Saga. However, instead of reusing the same tried-and-true space battle formula, they instead made up their own unique formula that's like a watered-down version of Episode 3's space battle from the DS game. So, the overall impression that I'm getting from this game was that TT Fusion wasn't trying to directly port the console game for their version. Instead, it feels like they were trying to adapt LEGO Star Wars 3 to the weakest target system. In this case, the Nintendo DS, which honestly gives them as developers a lot of room to potentially make a really good game. LEGO Star Wars 3 feels more like a traditional LEGO Star Wars game than its console counterpart. Take for instance the scale-back hub that's more focused on being an interactive menu rather than being a giant level. And since the levels can be levels rather than a real-time strategy game, they do a surprisingly better job at telling the stories from the Clone Wars than the console game. But due to the more focused nature of this game, you feel like you are actually playing through these stories and their highlights, as being told by a kid who just finished watching the episode. And as a result, levels like Bombad General and Keepers of the Peace, which had their stories sidelined for the new game modes on the console versions, are now told and played out much better on the portables, though the morals are still suspiciously missing. And thank the maker, the Paper Puppet Show cutscenes were fully replaced with proper in-game cutscenes and full motion video, even on the Nintendo DS. The game looks and sounds really good too, especially on the 3DS and PSP versions with their much nicer graphics and details and smoother play experience and better lighting, controls, and pretty much everything. But the DS game still looks pretty good due to the very stylized art style. And heck, I find the in-game animations are a lot nicer than the Complete Saga. And overall, this game feels more like it borrowed from LEGO Star Wars 2 from the DS than the Complete Saga. They just managed to find a way to make it less glitchy. Which leads me to my biggest question about this game. Is LEGO Star Wars 3 from TT Fusion a good LEGO game? And the easiest way for me to check this is to go into the free play mode, and gosh darn it, they've done it again! It has the same stupid limitations as before. You can only choose one character and the game picks the rest for you. Why? How hard could it have been to let you just choose and pick your own characters from the remaining of the rest? How hard could it be? It almost feels like Traveler's Tale is deliberately trying to stop me from retelling the tale of Darth Jar Jar. It saddens me that after all these years, half a decade of LEGO Star Wars games on the DS, and it ends up that the buggier and glitchier game, LEGO Star Wars 2, is still the better LEGO game on the system. But even with that said, I do find that due to LEGO Star Wars 3 removal of the second player, this restriction actually isn't as impactful as it is in the Complete Saga. Truthfully, despite not being as creative as LEGO Star Wars 2, the custom character builder is not the best. This is still the best LEGO game that I've personally seen from TT Fusion, especially for the Nintendo DS. And as a result, this game is not only better than the Complete Saga in every conceivable way, but it also means that my journey's at an end. And LEGO Star Wars 3 is absolutely the best LEGO game on Nintendo DS. Even though I do personally feel that LEGO Star Wars 2 is the better LEGO game. But I find that it's just a little too glitchy for the average DS goer to actively recommend to everyone. I want people to play this game because I enjoyed it. But as a LEGO Star Wars game, LEGO Star Wars 3 is just a better built game. And it's a more enjoyable Star Wars game. In my view, it's one of the best Star Wars games which I've personally played on DS. Even comparing it to the main console version of this game, I actually prefer TT Fusion's adaptation of it, especially with how it handles the stories in the Clone Wars. But with that said, I wouldn't actually recommend the DS version of it, especially if you have access to a Nintendo 3DS or a PSP. All versions of LEGO Star Wars 3 play the same. However, if given a choice, the 3DS and PSP games look, sound, and perform way better than anything that the DS game could ever dream of. And if I had to choose between the three versions, I'd personally get the 3DS version. though the PSP game is tempting. But no matter what game you choose, you'll get a fun and an amazing Star Wars experience. But anyways, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you have yourself a good day, and as always, take care. And don't forget, every Friday there's a new poll for the 16-bit viewers special. Vote for which games you want to see us review in this channel's community tab. Links will be provided below.